Most modern motorcycle chains come pre-packed with grease from the factory, so chain lube, is it just a massive scam? Dr. OK Wack is a chemical company in Germany that makes S100 or S.100, as well as some car cleaning products and also specialist cleaning products for the electronics industry. Now, they just recently did a press launch about their S100 White Chain Spray 2.0. It's a new chain spray, and they invited a few of us over there to the factory where we could see where everything's made and also meet some of the 30 R&D staff. Now, while I was there, I took Dr. Mario Kraft to one side. He's a deputy head of research and development at Dr. OK Wack, and I asked him, do we really need chain lube?
Well, you want to have the maximum lifespan of your chain, and in order to minimize wear, for example, you need to regularly lube your chain to expand the lifetime.
So what's it actually doing?
Actually, it's reducing the wear between the sprocket and the balls to avoid that you get the seesaw at the sprocket, and that you need to change the whole chain. Chain elongation, for example, is another point which we can avoid with applying the chain loop. Another point, of course, is reducing or avoiding at all corrosion of the chain, which is well have a bad influence on the chain life.
So obviously, most chains now on most performance motorcycles have O-rings, X-rings, W-rings, all kinds of different rings. They're trapping grease in there. So the chain is already lubricated. You've bought that chain with lubricant in it. Are we actually trying to protect everything except that bit?
That one, the grease inside, stay inside, and we don't want to fill it up, refresh it or whatever. It stays in there, and we are not able to reach that area with the chain loop. So we want to lubricate everything around that area at the chain, the outside part, the inside part, that we have reduced wear.
So I've seen a fair few lubricant manufacturers, and yourself included, would say that penetration is important. You're trying to find a balance between fling and penetration.
Exactly.
And they're two things that are hard to balance, aren't they?
So of course it's the wear protection. It's the corrosion protection. We already talked about that one. Penetration and throw-off behavior are two as well important factors, but they're a bit contradictions to each other. So if I manage to reduce the throw-off behavior to a maximum, then I have the problem that I don't really have a proper penetration anymore. So I just apply the chain spray or on the outside, in front of the back sprocket, and I spray it on top, and it's turning around that side. So the chain spray should be able to being sprayed on top and migrate in all the areas of the chain. So the side ones and as well underneath, so that the chain loop is evenly distributed everywhere the chain.
So penetration isn't. You don't want this lube or a cleaner, for that matter, to penetrate past the O-rings. What you're looking, the penetration is penetrating into, like, under the roller there. The sides of the plates.
Exactly.
But it's also about when, obviously you should spray on the inside of a chain to make sure it draws itself out, but it's about that penetration, allowing it to creep around the chain.
Around the chain,
almost penetration is kind of throwing us off on the wrong track, because we think that must mean about getting inside it. You don't want to get inside them.
No, we don't want to pass the O-rings or Z-rings, because that one, if we would be able to pass them, then the chain is broken, because then it means the loop can as well migrate out of these areas, and that loop should be staying really inside. So we are not willing to open the seals, attack the seals, or put anything in or out from the area.
So in fact, presumably part of the chain loop's job is to protect those seals as well. Because if we leave those seals to the elements, whether that's road filth, any solvents in the environment, any attack corrosion that those O-rings get, and actually, is corrosion so important? Not just for having a nice looking chain, but the fact that any corrosion you get within those plates, right where the
can as well destroy the O-rings. And so then the lubricant is coming out, and then the chain cannot be moved anymore. And then the wear is very bad, or the chain is even getting ruptured.
So again, we're protecting that grease that comes in. So you use the cross-cylinder test, don't you, to check the performance of your chain loops and obviously compare them to competitors. There's only so far you can go with the amount of force on a sprocket, between the sprocket and the teeth, but that wear test is a good indication, isn't it, of how well you can reduce the wear. Nothing's
Exactly.
going to create a frictionless environment, is
Yeah,
it? But
exactly.
it's-
So with this test, we're able to see how well we're able to increase the wear protection
Yeah.
and how much we're able to reduce the wear at the end of the day.
So how long does it actually take? Presumably you go through a fair few different variations. You're on your white chain spray version 2 now.
Mm-hmm.
How long has it taken to develop that chain lube?
A good question. This is a common question which I get in common for product development,
Yeah.
and it's very, very difficult to explain, to assume or to estimate beforehand.
Yeah.
So even if the needs look rather simple, for example, just adding a fragrant,
Yeah.
it cannot end up that you test for 1 year until everything is working again.
Okay.
So you add a fragrant, for example, and the viscosity is gone, and then you have to fiddle around until everything is working again.
Okay.
So it's very difficult to say from the beginning how long it will take. In common, you can say between half a year and year is a common project, but it can be as well easily 2 years,
Yeah.
or it can be even that you come up with the idea and say it's not possible what we want to have.
And presumably every single compound that you add to a product, you have to make sure that's not going to attack an O-ring. It's not going to accelerate corrosion, or it's not
Absolutely. So every single ingredient which you want to use has to be checked as well on O-rings, on material compatibility, but as well on are the different compounds which you're using, are they compatible with each other,
Yeah.
or are they starting to forming any kind of crystallization, for example, that you have crystals on the aerosol can and you cannot spray the product out from the can anymore.
Okay. So there's a lot to it.
A lot of it.
But overall, you would say chain lube is not a waste of money. We do need it.
Definitely not, and especially this is what the feedback is from the market, that chain lubricating of a chain is really expanding the lifetime of a chain, and as well something which even the chain manufacturers are really recommending. Apply the chain lube on your chain so that you have a long-lasting chain.
Now, of course, he would say that, wouldn't he? Because S100 makes chain lube and they want to sell chain lube. So when I got back, I spoke to some manufacturers of chains to find out what they said. Now, Derek McMartin is the managing director of Bickers. That's a UK importer and distributor of RK chains. He said that any chain will rust if it's not lubricated, and the seals will become dry and crack, letting that grease escape. Now, he's talking about that grease that's inside the chain from the factory. So what he's saying is if you don't keep those O-rings lubricated, then as they start to degrade, that grease can get out. So you've lost the lubrication from inside. What you're not trying to do is get grease into the chain. You're trying to lubricate the outside of the chain. He said you don't want anything to penetrate the chain seal, especially as a cleaner, as this will wash the grease away. He said you must use a specialist cleaner that won't attack the O-ring, and is also not high powered enough that it's going to blow past the O-ring or blow dirt and grit in. So from RK Chain's point of view, lubrication is important. I also spoke to Jim Irwin. He's responsible for DID chains and JT chains and sprockets in the UK. He said that a good quality lube will tack off overnight, and even after use leaves a film on the chain's external surfaces to keep moisture from the chain and the internal bushes and the pins, etc. So again, we're looking at preventing corrosion on that chain and protecting those O-rings. He also said that absolutely perfect chain alignment is not always easy to do. It is, going by the guidelines on your swing arm, they're not 100% accurate. Swing arms are a lot more accurately made than they were 20, 30 years ago. But if your wheel isn't exactly in line, if the rear sprocket isn't exactly in line with the front sprocket, you're potentially going to be putting wear on the plate. So if the chain is between the sprockets, if the sprocket is slightly misaligned, it can start to push against the chain. Now, as it's pushing against those side plates, it can be relieving the pressure just slightly on the O-ring on the other side, which could theoretically allow the grease to start to come out, which is why it's important to keep those O-rings well lubricated. If they're allowed to go dry, if they're allowed to start to crack or degrade in any way, and remember, they're constantly rubbing all the time that chain's going around. If they're allowed to degrade, that just slight movement is going to further help that grease to get out and ruin the lubrication inside. Now, there's also an argument that says that the force between the chain pulling hard on that sprocket, you've got a huge amount of torque going through that. That force, metal to metal force, means any lubricant between those 2 points just won't do anything. And actually, yeah, that does make sense. But that's not the only bit you need to lubricate. There's obviously there's the grease within the pins, but there's also the roller. That hasn't got grease directly behind that. You want a lubricant that's going to penetrate in there, but not penetrate past the seals. And that penetration is also important for creep, to allow the lubricant to, as you spray it on, to creep around the chain before it sets off. So a lot of it is to do with preventing corrosion on the chain, and to keep those O-rings supple. Now, I also spoke to Mark Fennick. He's the director of B&C Express, importers of Tsubaki chains. They do a lot of work with race teams. He said that the lube will make its way onto the sprocket, and even though there is a great force between the chain's rollers and the sprocket's teeth, a small amount of lube will always be evident on the shallow of the sprocket. And remember, we're not talking about putting a lubricant on a chain when you buy the bike and then never touching it again. We are meant to keep chains clean and regularly lubricated. He said chains are the most abused item on a motorcycle, yet the most overlooked maintenance-wise. Cleaning is important, and using the correct cleaner that doesn't harm the rubber seals is a must. Carb cleaner, for example, is the worst thing you can use as it can make the seals baggy. Use a recommended cleaner and one that's water soluble so it can be washed off easily, taking the muck with it, then dry, then lubricate the chain. So the next question has got to be, what lubricant's the best? Should you use a dry lube? Should you use a wax lube? Should you use one that flashes off, a white chain spray? There's so many different chain lubes out there and they vary in price massively. Should you just use engine oil? Now, there's been some fantastic features done by Ryan over at Fort 9. And I was going to test some chain lubes and actually gave up when I saw his videos because he got into it so well. But we're UK based. There's a lot of lubes that he wasn't able to cover. So we are going to do it. We're going to analyse everything we can. We're going to be looking at fling. We're going to be looking at corrosion protectant. We're going to be looking at how they work with the seals, how much grit sticks to them. From there, we're going to narrow it down and we're going to send them away to an independent lab for lubricant testing. So that's coming soon. If you want to see that, make sure you hit that subscribe button because we've got a lot of advice coming up on this channel. We're going to be testing a hell of a lot of stuff over the next few months and it's going to be pretty eye-opening. Bollocks! I didn't bring the fucking chain lube.